It was almost impenetrable, Jane. I am at base camp and we've stopped here. This is where most of the fighters retreated to spend the night last night, and the senior commanders who I wish to talk to are still sleeping the horrors of the night. They took heavy casualties. I'm told more than 50 injured, at least 6 killed, but those numbers subject to confirmation when I get to speak to the senior guys who are still resting up or asleep at the moment. They retreated in disarray. What they're finding in Bani Walid is that the Gaddafi forces there are very, very well dug in, much more heavily armed than they expected and not dislodgeable. They've also described to me a city where, while some of the citizens are undoubtedly held hostage by circumstance, many of the homes are heavily armed, shooting coming from private homes, shooting coming in fact from all directions. There is no such thing as a safe house or a place they can trust when they move in from the outskirts of the city in further, as they do in these probing missions where they advance and then retreat. Even elderly men are sitting in houses, we were told, with 6 or 7 rifles in, loaded up with ammunition, and they're telling us that they have everything in Bani Walid, all kinds of artillery, and they have very, very skilled marksmen on the roofs there shooting at them. So they're facing something that at the moment they can't overwhelm. They could of course overwhelm it if they came back with heavy artillery themselves, but then of course there is this factor of the innocent civilians of Bani Walid caught in the middle of it. It's a very difficult decision to take, and that's why they're taking it so slowly.
So this could be one of the hardest battles at the moment, Anita. A lot of the fighters were injured. I mean, how they're being treated? Are the facilities there to look after them?
There's various stages. There's an emergency medical treatment centre where we are. It's just over there. And the ones who, once they've been stabilised there, they're taken back further up the road. I should explain, Jen, I'm on the northern side of Bani Walid. You're used to me talking to you from the southern front. Well, we've come round the other side to have a look at things here. So this road runs behind me here, straight up really effectively to Tripoli, and there are better hospitals along the way that of course are now solidly behind the NTC forces, and that's where they're taking the more seriously injured for treatment.
Okay, Anita, thanks for that. Let's go to Hoda now. Hoda, I know you've been trying to get close to Sirte. It's not as easy as you expected. It's not as easy as the fighters expected to get there. But what are you hearing about what's going on inside the town?
Well, as you said, it's very difficult for the fighters to get inside the town. Specifically here in the east, they're not even able to get close to Sirte at the moment. Each time they try to advance, well, they're met by fierce retaliation by the Gaddafi forces, who seem to be, according to the fighters, very well organized. And I have to tell you that the fighters here in the east do have some heavy weaponry. They have tanks, they have artillery pieces, so they do have the means to inflict some damage on the Gaddafi forces, and they're not able to. Now we are hearing that from the west they did manage to go in to a certain point on Friday, but then they came under heavy shelling, exactly the same as what happened in Bani Walid, and had to pull back all the way to Wadi Jarif, which is about 30 kilometers from the city center of Sirte, but still in the Sirte district. Now we're also hearing reports that there were some street fighting in some of the areas inside Sirte, and those are reports that we cannot confirm because we're not in there, but the reports we're getting is that that fighting happened in areas referred as number 1, 2 and 3, and mainly those are the north coast on the Mediterranean coast, I would say, the western area and the southern area of Sirte. Also one report about the fighters reaching once again and retaking once again the airport south of Sirte. We still don't have any information, however, whether they kept control of that airport or not.
And Hoda, I've been hearing that there's a real sort of propaganda campaign happening. A lot of the people in Sirte and Bani Walid are being fed every day updates on the sort of atrocities being committed against innocent civilians. And I guess that's helping their resolve in fighting the fighters, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you see it especially here in the east. They did advance throughout the weeks we've been here, but every single village we've gone through is empty. The people have left. They've displaced themselves and went to camp kilometers deep inside the desert, completely isolated from everything. And that is because there is a propaganda campaign that is working for the Gaddafi camp, and people are afraid of the fighters. They did hear all sorts of rumors about them. Some of the fighters, it has to be said, did not behave in the best way as they were pushing through villages. So people are afraid. This you also feel as you get closer to Sirte. The fighters themselves are scared to go through those areas because they know that the civilians in those areas are not all welcoming them, and they know that they have to thread a very thin line. There've also been attacks, or threats at least, of attacks now coming from the south, from the desert into these areas that are supposedly under the NTC fighters' control, and that is also another concern.
Okay, thank you for that, Hoda Abdelhamid. And in the capital, Tripoli, schools have reopened after months of violence forced them to close. Children at the Faya school gathered in the grounds for the preschool roll call. Some of them carried the green, black and red flags of the National Transitional Council. More schools will open across Tripoli throughout the coming week.